Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. Adam and John here, and we got somebody on here that's kind of like elusive, right? Like these guys from Behind the Bow, they put out a film once a year. They kill all these big bucks. They do all sorts of stuff on Instagram and whatnot, but trying to track them down, it's like you don't have very much information on them. We had Curtis on few years ago to talk a bit about antelope hunting and some of the behind the bow stuff. And now we've got Skylar Sommers again, from Behind the Bow. How you doing tonight, Skylar?
Pretty good. Yeah, not bad. Wishing I
So,
had a few more tags, but that's about it.
well, we've got an abundance here. So,
Yeah.
you're talking with the world's most elusive hunter. John hunts, whenever he can squeeze it in, and I'm the world's worst bow hunter. So it's like but honestly, I've been passing I've passed more small bucks this year than I've ever have in my entire hunting career. Like I don't the bucks are there.
We didn't normally pass them, though,
I
right?
know, that's what I'm saying. Like I just shot all of them. Everything that walks by, like I'd shoot them. And I even said this year, like I was just going to go on a killing spree. And then these little bucks keep showing up, and I'm like, oh, I just can't. I can't do it. I can't do it. And so my daughter, she told me tonight, she's like, well, because I just asked her, like, what do you want me to shoot? And she's like, well, at least a 6-point. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, there's an 8-point that's busted off out there. That's 4 on one side, and it's got just the base. She's like, nope, let him go. I'm like, I've never teach her that. Like, she's like, no,
Right.
next year he'll be really big. She's 7, right? So,
Yeah.
but
Got to figure it out.
yeah, she's, and I'll ask her, like, what are we gonna do tonight? And she's like, well, if you shoot a deer, like, we're gonna have to cut it up. So, like, okay, that's great. But yeah, so for people who don't know, like, who you are or whatever, and I guess we should probably tell this now. So we told this, I think, before when we were on with Curtis, but we were down at ATA, and
Our first year
our
down.
first year at ATA, we went into this bar, and we didn't get any food, and Uncle Frank was just drinking IPAs. He just kept saying, I'll have that IPA.
We ordered the food, and it took so long that in the meantime, Uncle Frank got, pretty blitzed.
And so there was these guys you could tell they were from the hunting show from ATA, and then talking with Dan Johnson at the bar right next to us. And Uncle Frank kept stopping and interrupting their stories and putting his hands on them, being like, hey, let me tell you. And Dan Johnson wasn't having it, but that was my first introduction to the guys from Behind the Bow, because that happened to be the gentleman at the bar. So do you remember that, Skylar?
I do remember that. Yeah, a little bit, not the details, but I do remember. I definitely remember meeting you for sure. And I do remember, Uncle there. So
Uncle Frank.
So
yeah, that was the night I had to walk him back to the hotel and put him to bed.
Oh. And we were staying on like the wrong side of town. And
yeah, I had to walk through like the homeless section.
John gave some homeless guy $100.
Yeah, that was a good one there.
But yeah, so for guys who aren't familiar with you or for Behind the Bow, like Skylar, for yourself, like what's your like hunting background? Like where did it start, and like your roots of like learning to hunt?
Oh yeah, I mean that my dad probably still. I think he might be even a little more elusive than John. He's probably the most elusive deer hunter that I know, and he does pretty good. But I started hunting in northern Wisconsin, up in the big, like the Nicolay National Forest and some of these huge tracts of public land, which, my first deer season ever that I ever gun hunted, I sat all 9 days. I didn't see a single deer. So that's kind of where my deer hunting experience started. And my dad didn't give me any sympathy whatsoever. He said that's just the way that it goes. And I said, okay. but yeah, he's pretty much, taught me everything that I know. I still, like, this weekend I was up north. We own a cabin up there, and my dad owns a cabin up there, and then I was scouting this weekend a little bit for gun season, which starts next Saturday for us here in Wisconsin. So he was up there. He's already got all his scouting done because he's retired now, and he spends most of his week up north at the cabin. And yeah, but yeah, and then so I've always been on the public land, and then I went to high school, and started bouncing around to a little bit more public land. My dad would drop me off before I had my driver's license as a public land, and I go set up like a dummy somewhere, and wherever I saw some tracks or some sign or a water hole or whatever I could find, I'd set up in there and, started learning that way. And my dad would pick me up. And then I met Curtis, who was, kind of had the same upbringing. He's a little bit older than me when I was in high school. And yeah, basically, since I met Curtis, we just started filming stuff in high school. And if you would see some of that footage, I mean, you get a good crack out of that stuff. It's pretty good. Some of our first ever filming. But Curtis was always big into the filming stuff, and he kind of got me into that. And I just kind of liked it. I don't know. And then ever since then, well, then after high school, obviously I left for the Marine Corps. So I lived through Curtis every deer season. And, he started learning a lot more, and basically I would learn from him over the phone while I was in the Marine Corps. He was probably the best friend that I had throughout, in high school. He's a really good friend. And then through the Marine Corps, he was probably the best friend that I had. One of the guys that talked to me the entire time, for those guys that have been, in the military or whatever, you're still friends with these people, but you don't talk to them while you're, doing that stuff. But Curtis was one of those guys that, all the time checking in, telling me about shed hunting or scouting or these pieces. When he killed that big buck in the marsh, Ocho, that big giant 8-pointer. That was probably, I remember the day that he shot that, and I was standing in the barracks just like jumping for joy, shouting out over the balcony and stuff, and everybody's like, what the hell's going on, dude? I'm like, it's November 9th, man. Big bucks are getting killed. So, but yeah, and then I would take leave from the Marine Corps specifically to hunt with Curtis and film. And when I would take leave, we would hunt the hills, and then, so started learning about that. Always kind of hunted the marshes because that's what's around here, where I'm from anyways. Within like an hour distance, it's mostly marsh. To get to the hills, I got to go about 2.5 hours or so. 2 hours, if 2 to 3.5 hours, I guess, is probably the distance that I would travel in Wisconsin to hunt the hills. But yeah, and then since I got out of the Marine Corps, then it's been pretty hardcore since then. We just, Curtis has always been probably the most hardcore bow hunting guy that I know for sure. I know a lot of bow hunting guys, so, and I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and I see what's going on with everybody. Curtis doesn't watch any of that stuff. He doesn't listen to nothing. He don't care. So, and that's what I mean. He's probably about as hardcore as it gets as far as public land bow hunting goes.
So from
it's inspiring.
So from that like side of it, like it sounds like you're like me, and I say that in like the nicest way possible, that like it doesn't sound like you were very successful. Like you didn't say like, oh yeah. So like, how did you, like, what was the first deer that you killed with your bow? Like, how old were you, and like what's that success story?
Well, so I started hunting with my dad up north when I was 11 years old, and I didn't kill my first deer. So that was gun when I was 12 years old. That was gun hunting, and I didn't kill a deer. The first deer I ever killed with my bow was with my bow, and it was probably 130-inch 9-pointer on December 27th at 12:30 in the afternoon. It was like 27 below, and my dad's like, "You're nuts. You ain't gonna make it till 4:30. Why are you going out there at 12 in the afternoon?" And then I got up in this tree stand that he had set up for me, and I called him, like, because I got up and I went to draw my bow back, like I normally do, just to draw it back and get situated in the tree and get the feel for drawing back in the stand, and it wouldn't draw back. And back then they had the cable crossing was on that little slide that was on the brace, and it was froze up. But I was 16 years old. I didn't know what the hell was going on, so I drew my bow back, and I couldn't get it to go back. And I called my dad, and I'm like, "Dad, I can't get my bow to draw back." And he's like, "Well, just sit there and see what comes in anyway." I'm like, "All right." And then I kind of was like messing with it. I figured out what might be the problem, and I was breathing on that little piece a little bit, and I got it to slide back and forth. And all of a sudden I look up, and here's this big 9-pointer at like 20 yards standing in front of me, kind of like the one right in between you two guys right there. I drew my bow back, and I put a perfect double long shot on him, and I called my dad back, and I was like, "Dad, I just killed a monster." And he's like, "What are you talking about? I thought your bow was froze up, or it wasn't drawn back." I'm like, "I got fixed it. Get over here, help me get him out of here." So yeah, I was 16 years old when I killed my first deer, and then after that, pretty much back downhill again.
So like, what kept you going, or like, how did you, like, what was your progress of like learning? Because I think for like a lot of the guys, and especially the guys that are like our Patreons, like, they're shooting a bunch of deer here and there, some deer that you don't recover, like there's a guy, and I want to get to this like later when we talk about like your Iowa hunt, but like he missed like the biggest buck of his life at 8 yards the other morning, and he's like, how do you like recover from that? He's thinking it's target panic. He's thinking like all these things. So like, and I want to get into that like I say later on, but like for you, like what was your progression of like learning and like sticking with it? Because it's like it's really hard for guys when you go out, if you're just starting out and you don't see any deer, you're going out there and you're trying to do everything right. You're going out, it's raining. You're like, "Oh, the guys say you got to go out in the rain." Like, so now you're sitting out there just getting soaked. Like, this sucks. Like, you go out there and it's 27 below or whatever. You're like, "This sucks." Like, even your dad's telling you, like, "You're an idiot." Like, like.
Well, he says that a lot. It ain't the first time I've heard that one from him. But no, yeah, I guess I would say probably, my dad was an inspiration because he was hunting the same stuff and he was killing stuff. And then, become friends with Curtis, and he's filming and he's showing me bucks and he's seeing bucks. And then honestly, after that, in high school anyways, probably the biggest motivational thing that there was probably all the guys that had their families private land, and they were always killing bucks. And it's like, well, I'm out, I can find the sign. I see the sign. I can find the sign. I see buck rubs. I find scrapes. I see big tracks. I see people sign. Just start learning that stuff and putting it all together. And then all these other people are killing bucks, and especially the private land guys. And I'm like, well, there's got to be a way to do it. My dad's doing it. He's doing it. He's killing bucks. So, there's got to be a way. And then just through years and years of not really doing any good, I guess that's the progression. I just had this determination through, two guys, my dad and Curtis, and then the motivation from all the private land guys that were killing bucks. It's like, well, there's got to be a way. And then, so let's figure it out. And, I guess you just don't want to lose. You feel like you're losing, but you just gotta try harder, I guess. I don't know. You just keep going, and there, you know, you gotta figure it out. There's a way. And it's weird when you're in high school and you're a younger kid, you know, you don't understand all this stuff, and I didn't understand it. Like, you think that you have to have private land to kill these big bucks, and you know, you don't even understand that you can move around. So, you know,
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, like for me, like when I started hunting with John and Uncle Frank and all of these guys, is like everything that you learn about on TV, and it's probably like the same, or like on YouTube, or like listen to podcasts or whatever, probably like with your dad, it's like that's what Frank was doing years and years ago, you know, just driving around looking for tracks, crossing the two tracks, and go in, look at the sign, walking the edges, doing all this stuff. And you know, as like you say, like as a high schooler, or like a young guy, you're just like, oh my God, I'm so hungover. Like, why can't we just go back home? Like, oh, this is, you know, like we look at all these spots, but we never hunt anywhere. Like, we only go hunt the same spots. And, you know, I grew up with like a gun hunting side of like, we had 240 acres in the UP by Wisconsin. So, like, rifle season, you went up there, you shot a doe, like maybe somebody would kill a buck, but like you just shot a deer. You'd like deer, dead. Like it wasn't like exciting. Like it was just like you see them with a rifle, you just shoot them, and then they're dead. And then you got a deer, you got meat, everything's cool. And like it was always
yep.
neat to see guys killing big bucks or whatever, but that was never ever like the conversation, you know. So then I start to hunt with these guys, and it was like you said, like you hunt the spot, like you hunt, like you don't realize you can move around. Then you go out on these big pieces of public, and it's like you can hunt wherever you want to. Like you don't have to keep
Yeah.
going to the same tree anymore, you know. And I
Yep.
think that's huge. Like, so what is like? It looks like from a lot of your guys's, I don't even want to call them videos. They're like films, like because there's been a progression, but they're like super high level now. A lot of the hills. So like, when did you start hunting the hills, and like what I guess what would you tell guys like when they're first encountering like bigger hill terrain like that?
I guess I I thought about this a little bit before getting on here with you guys, but um, I just want to say I am no expert master of the hills. I enjoy the hills. I feel like I'm fairly knowledgeable about the hills, but you know there are guys that do, you know, have been doing this stuff a lot longer than me. So I don't want to try and act like you know, I've got it all figured out, because I don't. But I started hunting the hills my last year in the Marine Corps. Curtis had got some information from, you know, a guy that, you know, motivated him or inspired him, and and then he just went down there and started doing that. And then my last year in the Marine Corps, he was talking to me about it. He's like, dude, you got to come down here with me. You got to, once you get out, we're going to be down here. And I'm like, all right. And then, so we started going down there and just learning that kind of stuff and seeing what happens. And it's come a long ways in the last 5 years since I've been out of the Marine Corps, for sure. I mean, I remember doing some pretty goofy stuff right away. And just trying to learn that kind of terrain, because it's definitely different than what's around here. It's farm country and marsh country. What'd you do, River? Oh man.
Ground tuning.
Good thing I don't. It's a good thing I don't have any bow tags left. But yeah. So I mean, it's come a long way for the hills, I guess. I mean, just through trial and error is kind of how it went. But 2017 is probably the first year that I hunted the hills ever, and I got into some. My first sit in the hills, I think I saw 14 deer, 14 bucks, and one of them was probably 165 inches. It was wild.
So, I guess like when you're looking at like, so now everything is, you know, Spartan Forge, base map, Onyx. Like, if you're looking at the hills, like from a mapping standpoint, Like, what are the things that you look for that stands out to you? You're like, okay, we got to hunt that, or we got to check that, or that's what we got to do.
I mean, my first thing, and it's always been my thing, is access, I guess, is probably my first thing that I look for. Like, what's the hardest to get to? What's the furthest away from any parking lots? Where is there no roads? Like, where are people not going to be? Because I'll go there. I mean, me and Curtis will go there. I mean, it don't matter where it is or how to get there and get there. But I want to get away from people is probably my first um, thing. In Minnesota, that was tough. Iowa's kind of tough. Iowa's got a lot of access points to different public land chunks. Wisconsin's pretty good about that. I mean, Wisconsin's got, a lot of the bigger chunks maybe only have one or two different parking lots on them, and you can get in there a ways and get away from some people. But then, as far as topography goes, I'm looking for pinches for sure. That's probably my number one thing, and then I look at what's on top. So I look for the tight pinches, and then I look at what's on the points by those pinches. Does it look, me and Curtis and Dakin, the guy from Iowa, call it woolly. Does it look woolly? Does it look thick and nasty up there? Does it look like there's going to be deer bedding up there? And this is all stuff that I'd like to, go in the springtime and figure out. Last year, a couple of years ago, I started my business, so I didn't get a lot of time this last spring to kind of do that stuff. But, if I'm going in somewhere, which I do a lot without any ground scouting, I just map scout it. That would be what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, different types of vegetation up top. I like CRP fields. If you watch the Iowa video, I mean, I was up in some big bucks next to some CRP fields, and every time I'm around a CRP field, I feel pretty confident about that. I think the does like to bed there or around it, and the bucks are going to be there. But yeah, big giant pinches and steep hills.
So, like, when you're looking at topo map in these hills, what are you when you're looking at the map and the topography, like, what is your like definition of a pinch there? I mean, like, so a lot of times, like, I'll think of it as like, some sort of like waterway and then an open CRP field and then like woods come together, right? And that could be anywhere, flat or marsh or whatever. But in the hills, you're probably not gonna have water up top, or you know what I mean? So what does it look like to you on a map? Like, what's your textbook pinch in the hills?
For me, it's something so steep that the deer aren't gonna cross there. I mean, it's so steep, and I gotta basically climb up a drainage of some sort, or, if I was map scouting, that's what I look for, something super steep, but somewhere where I can get up in, because then, I crawl up this drainage and then it levels out. Usually it's in between two big points on the side of you, which typically with the right wind, deer are going to bed on those points, looking down the ridge with the wind hitting them in the back of the head. But there's a crossing up there somewhere, at the top. And usually in the hills, the fields or, CRP or whatever's up top, the fields are always pretty much from what I've seen up top. Minnesota, I mean, there's some fields on the bottom, but those are kind of irrelevant to me when I'm map scouting. But so basically, there's this, anywhere from 60 to 20-yard pinch up top in between the field and between and where they can cross in between these 2 points. Otherwise, the rest of it's so steep, and that's where I shot my Iowa buck. It was so steep in there that, it didn't look like it in the video. I was kind of disappointed about that watching the video, which I watched a couple times now. It's steep. Like you couldn't, with that drainage that I was sitting on, you couldn't walk up the sides of it until where I got to my tree, and I like that kind of stuff for me anyways. And guys hunt the bottoms. I would personally, I probably would never hunt the bottom unless I have the perfect wind scenario. Either dead calm and I'm hunting scrapes on the bottom, or I'm in, being in a scout sniper platoon in the Marine Corps, you learn a lot about, wind, especially going to, mountain scout sniper school and stuff like that. You learn a lot about how the wind travels through the terrain and stuff like that. If I have a big giant valley, and the wind's going to follow that, then maybe I would, if I had a plan for it, like a thermal hub or whatever the guys call it these days. But where all the sign is, if I could get to it and I knew my wind was going to be traveling one way from there, I might set up there. But I've set up on the bottom maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 5 years, just because I don't know what's going to happen with the wind, and it's almost impossible to tell.
And so it sounds like with your, I guess with your access, and you're saying that you're climbing, so you're walking in to the predominant wind, and then you're climbing up. So you're accessing from the bottom then, with the wind in your face coming up over the top.
I'd like to, yeah. I mean, I prefer to, but not every chunk of public, allows for that. But if I had the choice, I would access from the bottom. And typically the fields are on the top, so it's, if I'm going in the morning, I don't want to walk through the field and blow out a bunch of deer. Anyways, so I would prefer to access from the bottom.
And you mentioned it like in the Iowa video, you're like, all right, we're up at 2 a.m. or whatever. Like, how early are you getting into some of these spots? I mean, because like in that Iowa video, like it's like you went in the one afternoon and there was a buck bedded right where you were at, basically. So
well, that was crazy. I mean, the Iowa stuff was crazy because I went in there on October 22nd on that rain day when I first showed up in Iowa, and I always wanted to look at that piece. And I went down there and I got into that bottom, and that bottom was destroyed. There wasn't a tree left. There wasn't a licking branch that survived down on that bottom. I've never seen anything like it. So I immediately was like, all right, I gotta go back. I gotta get in here and I gotta set up somewhere. And I picked the spot. And I didn't know if it was CRP or what it was. I'd never been in there before, but I always wanted to go in there. Curtis and I didn't go in that piece in the springtime. We had come down a bunch and scouted a bunch of different chunks in the springtime, but never that one. We had looked at it on the map and like, we should go in there, but we just didn't have time or whatever, we didn't get to it. And yeah, I'm on my way in. It's in the video. I saw like a 140-inch deer on the side of the ridge. I thought I was going to get a shot at it. But my release was in my pack, which now I don't do that anymore. I don't put my release in my pack. That sucker's in my pocket all the time. But yeah, and then I did the same thing, crawled up the drainage. I think there's a little bit of footage of that. I mean, it's rocky, and I've watched deer even on some of these drainages that aren't so steep, but they have like a 2-foot drop or something. These deer, they kind of jump them, or they kind of like commit to crossing the drainage. And even if my scent's down in there, they'll just cross right over it. But it doesn't seem to be that way if I'm, walking anywhere else. They'll stop on that trail. Because there was another time me and Curtis went up just a small little dip of a drainage. And we had probably 13, 14 different deer just kind of commit to crossing that little dip. And none of them stopped to even bat an eye at it, which is crazy to me. So, just something that I learned that time. But yeah, that big buck that first day in Iowa, I think was bedded in that CRP field. But I had that right wind blowing out over that point, and I had anticipated things to be bedded up there. And I guess we kind of just got right on that one. But that spot also was pretty far, really far in there, like 2.5 miles.
Well, that's what was crazy. I was watching the video again because I watched it a couple times also, and it was like it looked like you guys shot that deer like super early, and then here you are like in the dark carrying it on your back, and I'm like, how freaking far was this damn thing? Like,
15 miles in.
Well, it was 2.5 miles, and I didn't really let Curtis help me. We had gotten a deer cart from the farmer Daryl that we were let us stay on his property, and we put it on the deer cart, and within the first 100 yards, we bent the shit out of the rim. It was just the tire. It was just junk. So I would rather have carried the deer like I did the whole way than be Curtis with the camera and pulling the wobbly ass deer cart that he had to drag that thing over logs. It wasn't rolling. It was just looked miserable. So I was kind of thankful to be carrying the deer. But I mean, with all this camera stuff too, I mean, we probably could have cut it up, but I mean, we're not out west hunters, and I knew obviously I was going to mount that deer. I'm not an expert on quartering out deer in the field, I guess. I mean, I should watch a few more YouTube videos to pack them out, but I just carry the whole thing, and then something to me is just want to get the whole deer out sometimes too. I want the whole deer out. You get that in my head, and I want the whole deer out. But we also have to take all this camera crap back at the same time. Can't do it. I mean, the pack's probably 70 pounds that we carry around every time. It's miserable. So it's like we got to get that stuff back. So we had to hike that stuff out and then hike back in, take pictures, do some more interviews, do some more filming stuff, and then drag it out. And yeah, by that time, I think we got that thing out at like 9:30 at night, 10 o'clock. We shot at 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah, I was like, Jesus Christ, like, because I was like, how much of this is like for the camera? Like, he's cutting it up, like, oh, because Curtis had something like that on his YouTube, like, or on his Instagram, where he was like carrying that doe out on his shoulders, and I'm like, these guys are always in the gym. They're just like bros, like we gotta carry.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
No.
We both been slacking pretty hard on the gym this year, but I mean, my first couple of years out of the Marine Corps, that stuff was a little bit easier. I'm coming up on 30 here pretty quick, so it ain't happening for me. Like my one this year, my one in Minnesota, I just dragged it through the creek. I was like, straight to the creek. It's pretty easy dragging them through the water, so I'm like, I'm just gonna drag them all the way as far as I can down the creek, close where it meets close to the road, and then I'll walk back, get with the truck, and drag them the rest of the way.
So since we're like on the Iowa hunt there, and through that video, like you missed twice in one day, like right off the get go. You mentioned that you were a scout sniper in the Marines, like you're school trained, right?
Yep.
Yep. So that's like a big deal. Like when I was in the Marines, like there was no raiders, so like first recon and snipers were kind of like the high, the special forces kind of the Marine Corps. Like there were no raiders. So like when I hear like, sniper, like school, like, graduated sniper school, like you're a guy that knows more about like camouflage. Like you're like, can you talk like a little bit about like how you have to graduate from sniper school, like the camouflage, like taking the shots and stuff and not being seen,
stalking.
And he's out there in a freaking flannel shirt, killing these deer,
looking like Dan Infalt.
Well, I mean, I guess there's a few points for that for me. I mean, Scout Sniper School is no joke. I mean, I mean, you do hundreds of stalks, but you get 10 graded on 10. And you need I believe it's 80% to pass. But I mean, there's a lot of rules and stuff that go into the stalking lanes in Scout Sniper School. But yeah, but to me, this when it comes to deer hunting, I mean, I'm not, Zach Fehrenbauer or nothing. I'm not on the ground. I'm not stalking. that might be a little bit different story if I'm talking about stalking up on deer on the ground, but I'm in a tree and all the leaves are orange and red. But if a deer looks up at me in October, all the leaves are orange and red. So I mean, and they're colorblind. So I mean, what difference does it make? That's kind of my take on it. But at the same time, I'm just so tired of hearing about all the different camouflage and people pushing these different brands of camouflage and stuff around. And that's never who I've been, and never really what's mattered. It's just not something that concerns me. So part of me probably is just kind of doing that, because we're filming the stuff, and I don't want people to think, watching our videos at least, that they need to pay a ton of money for a bunch of camouflage and stuff, because I mean, you can shoot them in a flannel,
Just got to be
I
warm,
guess.
right?
Yeah. But I mean, the double miss as far as skull sniper stuff goes, that's pretty heartbreaking. I hope none of my sniper school instructors or anything like that watch this video and be like, "What's this guy? He can shoot a rifle, but he can't shoot a bow and arrow." But
Well,
I mean,
well, and that's kind of like what I wanted to go. Like the mental thing is like that's got to be tough on. It's tough on anybody. Like when you miss and then you miss again, and we kind of talked about it. Like, the difference between like making that next shot and not being already in your head saying, "Don't mess this up, don't mess this up," or just being like totally relaxed and like this deer's gonna die. Like that's what I'm here for.
yep.
Like how do you rebound from that? Like,
I don't know. I think the film didn't really do maybe those misses, I guess, justice, because I probably didn't film everything that I should have filmed. But initially, when I missed the first one, I was set up late. I got up in there late. It was getting light out. That first buck busted me, so I wasn't even set up for that one yet. So that busted me, and then I'm like trying to get set up and stuff. And now I don't do this either. I don't leave my rangefinder in my pack either. And so that's always in my tree harness, which I put on before I climb the tree. Obviously, my tree harness has pockets on it, so I keep my bow hook and my rangefinder in there. So when I get up to the top of the tree, my rangefinder and my bow hook are right in there. But I didn't do that, and it's just like things you work out over time, I guess. But after that first buck busted me at like 20 yards, I mean, I could have killed that buck, but he did end up busting me. I was still trying to get set up, get all this camera crap set up, and all of a sudden I look out in the CRP field, and that buck was staring at me, right at me, and he's eye level with me because he's at the top of the CRP field, and he's like this, and I had my arm out like this on the camera arm, trying to pull the camera to me, and when I looked up and I saw him, so I held my camera arm like this and stared at him for what felt like 5 minutes. So I was freaking out. I'm like, he knows. He's like looking into my soul, man. He knows right where I'm at. So, but then there were some other deer in the draw on the opposite side of the CRP field. So, which I didn't really realize at that time, but he was focused on them when I shot at him. And I had all day at that point, probably. I could have reached in my pack and got my rangefinder and got everything set up. I thought the thing was at like 48 yards, which, I was pretty comfortable shooting at. I got ripped apart on YouTube a little bit for taking that shot because you can't see the vitals and stuff, but the camera's about 2 feet lower than, me when I'm standing up too. I usually set the camera up so that when I'm sitting, I can film stuff. And when I'm standing, it's about waist height, So, I mean, I could see probably the top of the lungs, but I was also not afraid to shoot through a little bit of CRP grass at the same time. But I set the pin for 45 yards and I aimed at the back strap, and the deer was at 38 yards. So basically I just launched the sucker right over his back, but that was just poor, execution of everything all together. you play it back and I'm like, wow, should have done a lot of stuff differently there. And then that second one, I wasn't ready for that. Self filming's hard, especially with a DSLR. It's all manual focus and stuff like that. I had that guy behind me and got low. And that guy did text me because I got his number and stuff, and he didn't like being called a dingus, and I apologize for that and whatnot. But the local guys from Iowa, they rattle and grunt like every 5 minutes. I don't know if you guys do that or not, but I'm not like that. I'm not blind calling at deer ever, really, because when I do see deer and I call at them, pretty much every time they run away from me. So it's like, why would I be calling when I don't see deer? None of them are going to come over here. So I don't call at them unless it's like I feel like it's a good chance. I have a good chance at them. But this guy's back there rattling and grunting and growling and doing everything, throwing the whole book at him. And so I wasn't really watching over there, and I'm filming some does. And all of a sudden I hear a bunch of, leaves crunching. And that one was just straight rushed, and he was moving. I stopped him perfectly. I thought I had him ranged perfectly. I'd already ranged that spot earlier in the day. And that one I took hair off his back. That one I was a little bit closer. But yeah, and then you're totally destroyed. Like, you want to pack up and leave Iowa for sure. I definitely did. I was like, dude, I don't deserve to be out here. But I mean, it's the same thing with my Minnesota buck. I mean, that's another story too. But it's like, it's deer hunting, dude. If you can't get over it, then you should probably go home, because it's just deer hunting, man. It's not. And I didn't know if Curtis was going to show both misses on the video or not. And honestly, I didn't really give a shit. I mean, show them both, whatever. People on YouTube tear you apart. People on the internet tear you apart, and it's just what it is. But it's deer hunting, and shit happens, and you don't really have a choice. If you're going to be a deer hunter,
You're going to
learn to live with it. Yeah, you got to learn to live with it.
So now that you're saying that, and it's like I'm like replaying the video and all that stuff in my head. Like, do you think that when you guys went back in there and when you ended up killing that buck, like, it happened so fast you didn't even have time to think about those other shots?
Yeah, part of it. I think so. Yeah, that deer come over the top of that ridge, and I told Curtis, like, if you're gonna sit on top that side of that tree, man, like, because it's straight down. We were lower than the tops, and there was a trail probably 3 yards from the tree, not even. And we had, and I got ripped apart on that shot too, on the YouTube comments. I read all the stuff Curtis sends to me. My dad reads them all. I see all the crap that people say. So it's like, you didn't stop them, but me and Curtis walked 2.5 miles in a bunch of rubber boots that are sitting down at the bottom of the tree. I didn't want, a 3.5, 4.5-year-old deer to hit that bottom of the tree 2 yards away from, my sticks and our stinky, sweaty boots down there, and just totally wheel out of there. And so I was like, well, and plus it's 3 yards away, coming straight down, and it was close. It felt like it was 10 yards in front of you. Like, you could reach down and touch them almost, because the hill was so straight down like that, and I had the pin on them perfect, and I just took what shot I had. So, and some guy said on the YouTube comments that I hit the artery along the spine, and that's why I shouldn't aim for that. I was like, well, I wasn't aiming for that, man. I was putting an arrow in the vitals, and the broadhead actually went through the top of the heart and straight out the bottom. He tipped over in like 25 yards.
I'm gonna say he didn't go far. I mean, shit.
Yeah,
he barely had enough time to get the camera in focus on him.
Yeah, I know, it is fast. It's pretty cool. But yeah, that happened super fast. Didn't really have time to get nervous. Self-filming is different, I think, too. That was the first day that Curtis filmed me in Iowa. That was the day we decided, and just by some miracle, it worked out that way. Yeah, I told Curtis, I was like, I don't think I could self-film me killing a deer in this spot. Like, I think it'd be impossible. for me to get it on film and kill him. And I was probably right. So he's
Yeah,
like,
that
well,
one
I'll
would have
film you tomorrow.
been really tough. I mean, coming in that quick.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
love
we
the part where
only,
you were putting the chew in when he was like, you're like, I had to pinch my, I had to throw it in real quick.
we're not big sponsor guys, but I'm still trying to, I would take Grizzly or Kodiak or Copenhagen, any one of them really for a sponsor. But, but every big buck that I've ever killed, I've been chewing tobacco.
So, for all of your guys' like approach, and like it was really big, like in the video, like when you were doing like your the interviews and all that stuff, when you're saying like, I didn't want him to get, when you picked that tree, like coming in the first day, like you didn't want to cross that trail, so you got up that wonky tree or whatever you called it, and then then you went back there. Like how, I guess, were you just, because those, the trail camera had to have been down in that bottom somewhere, like up the drainage, right? So like where are you at with like because you guys do it looks like in some of the other videos too, like with multiple day sits in the same stand, like how do you what are your concerns about like wind or
Or just dirtying up the place.
blowing out an area like multiple days in a row?
I sat that same area, but different sides of the ridge. So I was on the same CRP field in that video a couple times, but I was on the deer too. So if I wasn't seeing the big bucks, I would have moved to a different area, for sure. And that's what I did the day that I went down and checked that camera. Curtis saw like 54 deer that day, and I saw like 2 does, and I had already been seeing all the big bucks up there. So I was like, well, they're moving, dude. So I got to get out of here and I got to go try something new. Um, so I packed up and went down and checked that camera that I hung the first day, and I had 4 or 5 different bucks over 140s, 150s. One of them probably like 170s on there. I was like, well, geez, man, they're back here somewhere. So I moved up that drainage, which was my plan, get close to the food, but then I hit that crossing, big giant crossing, so steep, and then 3 different points came down and big giant cross. Couldn't. I was like, I gotta sit this a little bit, let my thermals pull down at nighttime, and I had the right wind for it. So I was like, well, my scent's gonna just float down this draw, and I'll set up in this big giant tree, overhanging, leaning over. I'll set up in there and sit this crossing, and that buck was bedded on the side of that point. And then I had the same wind for the next day, so I was like, well, I'm gonna sit this all day tomorrow because I think it's gonna be better for a morning sit anyways, because there's fields up top. Deer are gonna be coming in from the fields, coming back to bed on these points, and I want to be, I want to be here in the morning once and just see what happens. And sure enough, he come through there, cross there in the morning, the next morning.
So one of the things like that was, would you consider that, because I don't, was that on Halloween that you killed that buck, or?
Yep, 8:30 in the morning, Halloween.
So would you consider that like pre-rut? Were they rutting? And does your strategy like in the hills change like when they're chasing or anything like that, or is that would you want to be in that same spot?
Can I grab my dog's doing something? I'm sorry, I had to.
Yeah, you're good.
Just give me a second.
Damn dogs.
You gonna get out and hunt anymore?
Maybe late season. Technically, I've only hunted once.
That was the
First night.
She likes to tear up my stuff sometimes when I don't pay attention to her.
You don't want that
Sorry,
happening.
guys.
No, you're
Yeah,
good.
sorry, guys.
We've had just about everything go wrong possible during podcasting, so little dog, no problem.
Yeah.
No problem.
Do I think those deer were rutting at that time, or pre-rut / rut stuff? No, I don't think they were. I didn't see any chasing at all. But back there where that camera was destroyed with scrapes. And in the years prior to that, Curtis and I had always had giant bucks hitting scrapes on Halloween midday. So, the closer I could get to a pile of scrapes was better. But like I said, I don't like sitting down on the bottom because I have no idea what's going to go on with my wind. Even if I had the right wind, but if the wind dies down for a little bit during the day at some point, it's going to roll around in there. My scent's going to roll around. So I always kind of like to be up top if I can. That way I know my scent, I get the actual wind coming over the top. It takes my scent the same direction.
So if it was the rut, like, so let's say that the deer are chasing and all of that, like, do you want to be in that same spot as far as like on top of the, finding that crossing at the head of the drainage, or like, between the 2 points, or does it change like where you'd want to be in the hills?
I think strategically in that specific spot, I think that would be a pretty decent rut spot. I mean, I was in between 2 or 3 big bedding points, which I could assume that there was does on. And Curtis, we did film some does in there. I did jump some does on the bottom. The does do like to bed on the bottom. I jumped a big buck down there too. But I think that's pretty good. Those pinches like that, or those big drainage crossings like that in between, that's where I'd want to be in an actual rut spot too. I would think in between 2 big points where does would bed, especially a crossing like that you can clearly see. I mean, Iowa's a different game, I guess, in Iowa, because this trail was 3.5 feet wide. I've never seen deer trails like it.
A cattle path.
Yeah.
So it is like they say, like Iowa's like worth the 5 years of points or whatever.
I think the deer density in Iowa is awesome for sure. And after that, I will never miss a year in Iowa for sure. I'll never not buy a point ever again. And I won't let my dad or any of my good close buddies ever miss it either. But yeah, I still think it's tough. It's still tough on public land no matter what. You got to be in there. It took me 8 days or 9 days to shoot that one. So I got there on October 22nd. I missed those 2 bucks on October 27th, and then I shot mine on Halloween. Curtis was not having the same experience as me, and I tried to get him in here, and he passed a couple good bucks on the film, probably bucks that I would have shot. I'm not as picky as Curtis by any means. I like to shoot deer. So, I probably would have shot a couple of those deer you let walk by, especially if they're at 20 yards. But took Curtis 24 days to shoot his deer in Iowa, our first year down there. But we did hit some warm weather that it got up to 70, and it'll come out in the next video, which I know at the beginning of the podcast we said that Behind the Bow puts one video out maybe every 2 years, but I think it's going to get a little bit better as far as that goes for Behind the Bow, because we've got about 6 different videos that we're trying to get rounded up here.
So what's the future for Behind the Bow? Like I said, you're on there pimping the hats and everything. And I actually went online. I was going to buy a hat, and it says like coming soon. So I was like, well, I don't know what that means. Like, I know they're already
Yeah.
shipping. Like, what the hell?
Well, we're pretty low key guys. So we bought 75 hats. I didn't know who would want a hat or who wouldn't want a hat. And we don't have people working for us. And I tell Curtis this all the time. Like, we could just tell people, like, hey, dude, I'm sorry, but I'm not sending you out hats during the middle of the rut. So, like, if you order a hat, you're gonna have to wait till I'm done deer hunting to get the hat. But if we get people ordering hats, it's kind of hard to do that. You want to get them out, as fast as you can. So we just were like, well, we'll do this little batch of hats, and then if they sell out, they sell out. If they don't, they don't. Whatever. We'll send. We'll take 2 days. We'll send them out quick, and then we'll go back to deer hunting. But because it's just me and Curtis, I mean, we gotta be in the woods every single day when we can. So tough. But yeah, so they're sold out. The camouflage ones, anyways, sold out right away. But we'll get some more. Curtis wants to get his next video, his Iowa buck, out by Iowa gun season, December 1st is kind of the plan. And then hopefully we can get some more out for Christmas time frame. If anybody else wants any more, we'll get some out. But behind the bow, I think the future plans, I think we'll just keep trying our best to kill big bucks and film it. And I kind of cheaped out on cameras this year and I didn't like it. And I'm going to go back to carrying around the heavy stuff. I tried to lighten up the load a little bit this year and wasn't for me. So I'm not very fond of the footage, I guess. So, cause I was thinking, I'm getting old and fat, better, get some lighter stuff, get this little baby 4th arrow camera arm and all the stuff you see people pushing out there to you. And the low light capabilities weren't really wasn't good for me. I didn't like it. So I'm going to switch back to the heavy stuff next year, which means I'm going to have to start working out again and getting back into shape because it ain't good.
So one of the things John always gives me shit about, because I killed an elk with a rifle and I missed a few deer with the rifle the other day. But you're talking about
the other day?
Yeah, not the other day, last year.
Last year.
I shot an elk at 275 yards with a rifle I'd never even held before after carrying around my bow for 4 days. Come home on our own property, and I missed a deer at 30 yards with a rifle, and then I missed a deer at 90 with a rifle. Just my rifle. Just absurd.
Yeah.
But
you should go to sniper school.
But he's like, you can't, we're a bow hunting podcast. You can't do this. And you're out there scouting for gun season. Like, how does that play in? Like, you're behind the bow.
Oh, for gun season?
Yeah.
Well, gun season for me, Curtis, he could care less about gun season. But for me, gun season, my grandpa passed away this last year, but my dad and my grandpa, I'd go up north and gun hunt, and it's hard up there. So, it's a tradition for me. I'll do it forever. I won't miss it. I refuse to miss it. I mean, I already missed 6 years while I was in the Marine Corps, so I don't want to miss it anymore. It's fun. It's hard up in the Northwoods, Wisconsin. The deer density is extremely low. And there's endless amounts of public land. I mean, millions of acres, and it's hard. So the last few years, I mean, I shot a buck my first year out of the Marine Corps. I shot a buck in one of my dad's spots, and ever since then, I've been trying to find my own spot, and I have not shot a deer with my bow. I let a spike go last year. Probably shouldn't have done that because it probably would have won the buck pool up there, honestly. I could have probably won $100 on that thing, but I let him go. But it's getting more and more. It's so hard that I want to do it even more and more. I'm like, I can find these rubs. I can find these big tracks. I find some scrapes. And I'm like, well, where the hell are they at, man? I mean, they're in. I could see their sign, but I can't shoot one. So it's like I'll sit all 9 days, all day long,
So
different spots, move around.
from that perspective, like, have you looked into like I mean, with your skill set, right? Have you looked into like the big woods bucks, like the tracking, like getting on a buck
I like
track
that.
and then,
I tried it. I have done that a couple times, but um, if there's snow, during gun season, I don't grab a muzzle loader or nothing and go out the second gun, because Wisconsin has a gun season and then the following week is a muzzle loader season. If you don't shoot one with your gun, you could use a muzzle loader the following week. I've never done that just because I've had to work. Usually I can't take that much time off of work. Um, but I do like that. I do like cutting tracks and I do like following them. I do get intrigued by some of these guys putting videos out about that kind of stuff. I like to watch that and I kind of like to, learn how they do that. And I think I might get more into that up there for sure because I mean, I've sat all 9 days before not seeing anything. I'd rather walk around for 9 days, honestly, and just
Make
maybe
something happen.
stumble into one or something.
well,
But
that dude Hal Blood up in Maine, the Big Woods Bucks, he's a former Marine, and like when he got out of the Marines, that's what he did is he went up to this giant tracts of
track
land, and then he gets on
track them
fresh
suckers
tracks, and
down.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, because the
that's
deer
awesome.
density so low. That's what they
Yeah.
do. So I mean that sounds like you got the land, like you just need the snow, and it'd
Yep.
be
I
one of
like
those
that.
things.
It's supposed to get a good amount of snow Wednesday, Thursday, I think, up there. So it might, but I found some good stuff this last weekend. I put on, I think I might walk 20 miles or so up there, and I got a couple good plans. But it's just trying to beat my dad. Got to shoot a bigger buck than him. So,
So when you go up there, do you still do all the filming and everything, or you say this is just this hunt's for me?
last year I didn't. I have filmed my dad because my dad kills bucks up there, so I filmed him a few times. I just sit with him and film because, gun hunting to me is not really about killing deer. I mean, I don't, I could come down here probably or go down in southern Wisconsin somewhere and probably, do a little bit better. Um, but I like to go up there with him and, you know, in the years past, my grandpa and stuff like that. And I just like it. I just like the cabin. I like the people and the conversations and the beer drinking and that kind of stuff. It's just what I like. And I do want to make a video on it. I think I'm gonna do well when me and Curtis had that stuff, I kind of really didn't give a shit about filming stuff that much anymore. And then, with the Bury the Hatchet videos, I'm like, all right, dude, let's get it going. To me now, if I'm not filming it, I mean, I don't even want to really be out there. It's not worth hunting if I'm not filming it. It doesn't even seem right anymore. So, um, I'm gonna make a couple gun hunting videos. Whether or not Curtis wants to be on the Behind the Bow channel, I don't know, but we'll see.
Behind the bullet.
Yeah, we have some orange Behind the Bow hats, and people bought them. So, I mean, what the hell?
Yeah, that's awesome. So for on the filming aspect of it, like what tips do you have for guys that are trying to do the self-filming thing? Like, is there anything that you've like learned or like just like straight up, it's hard, it sucks, and you understand it's going to be difficult?
I mean, I'm gonna post something on my Instagram pretty soon. But the day before I shot my Minnesota buck, I had what I think is a booner. Had it been 21, 22 inches wide, 10-pointer, probably one of the biggest bucks that I've ever seen in the tree stand at 35 yards. And if I wasn't self-filming, uh, I think I would have killed him for sure. I drew back on him. If I would have got 5 more seconds, I probably still would have killed him self-filming. Um, but tips for self-filming, I mean, it depends what you're trying to do. I mean, Curtis is a freak of nature with all this stuff. And so don't like look at what Curtis does and think that everybody can do that, because certainly I don't think everybody's cut out for that. I mean, he's filming with some very heavy cameras with, some big lenses and stuff that, maybe he's not even affordable to your average guy, but Curtis runs a business that, he films stuff for his livelihood too, so he has invested a lot of money, but we invested a lot of money before that into this stuff. But if you're just trying to film your hunts to show your grandpa or your dad or whatnot, I mean, there's a lot of good video cameras out there. Like I just bought a Panasonic camera this year. I like to see 4K at least. Dan Infalt, no offense, Dan Infalt's a legend for sure, but his videos are, I mean, they're down there a little bit. The quality of the actual videos poor. The quality of the content is excellent for sure. So it's just deciding on what you want to do as far as that goes. Do you want to make HD 4K quality films, or do you just want to show people what you're seeing and what you're doing? Honestly, I think Dan Infalt should probably just get an iPhone and use that, because iPhones do great stuff these days. But yeah, I bought the Panasonic. Shoots 4K, 60 frames per second. 60 frames per second allows you to be able to slow it down a little bit if you want to do, a little bit of slow motion. Keeps the audio. So I'd like to, if I were to buy anything, I would make sure at least it has 4K, the capability of 4K, 60 frames per second. But typically you're going to shoot in 4K, 25 or 30 frames per second, depending on kind of what kind of look you want. Different motion blur between 24 frames per second and 30 frames per second. 60 frames per second is not going to have any, really any motion blur at all. It doesn't look what your natural eye sees. It looks a little goofy. So, filming's cool. I like it, but it's hard. Yeah, for sure. And it's cost me a couple big bucks. That's for sure too. But that's okay. That's okay.
I don't want this to come off like the wrong way, but like the way that you guys do your videos, like I loved to see all of your failures, like the
there's a lot of those,
and the falling in the creek, and I just seeing the quality of what you guys do with the cameras and everything like that. When you're I think I got water in this lens, it made me want to puke, because I'm that's expensive. That's an expensive mistake. And you're I dropped my interview camera from the tree or whatever.
That was the same day. Yeah.
So man. When everybody's, because John and I have filmed, self-filmed, and it's just it's a lot of freaking work, and it's extra stuff to set up. So what is your mobile hunting setup? What are you carrying for stick, stand, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I figured we'd get into that a little bit. I do have a saddle. I have a beast stand, and I have a Lone Wolf assault, a regular Lone Wolf. I don't have any custom gear stuff, even though I think I probably like a custom gear just to see what it's all about. I had seen them at one of the Deer Fest, I think it was. I saw a Lone Wolf custom gear stand. It was pretty cool. I like the compactness of it, I guess. But yeah, I tried self-filming out of the saddle in Iowa. I like the saddle. I do. I like sitting in it. I don't like shooting out of it, and I don't like filming out of it. I like carrying it, and I like sitting in it. But I like my B stand. My B stand's awesome. It's not perfect. None of these tree stands and none of these saddles I don't think are perfect, and I don't think you'll ever get something that's perfect. But my B stand's light. I just bought those tethered one sticks this year. I like them, and this is where, Behind the Bow is probably going to fail someday because I'm pretty critical about this kind of stuff. And uh, never are we going to be, like if we don't like something, I'm not going to tell people I like something if I don't like it. And Curtis definitely won't either. I like the tethered sticks are nice. They're light. I don't really like grabbing onto them. They got like a weird um, bracket on the back. Kind of gets in the way of my fingers when I try to climb up and grab. Um, and I don't like them if I'm going high in the tree because if they work really nice on straight trees, they work really good on soft trees. But it seems like if I'm in like a hard oak tree or something like that, or something with, it seems kind of dangerous with that rope, and the boat cleat type. Like the stick could kick off the tree or something up high. So I use my B sticks up high if I'm going higher. I only have 3 tethered sticks. I always carry 1 B stick at least, sometimes 2. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't put them high just because I don't feel safe on them. I don't. The B sticks cinch down. They got a nice cleat on them. They're really cinched down really tight to the tree, which I like. They feel, you could yank that thing as hard as you could, and it's not gonna, waver on the tree whatsoever. So, but the beast stuff is light, man. It's quality. It's good. I like the beast stuff. All of it's nice. Uh, I like those tethered sticks. I do like them. If you're only going 3 sticks high or whatever, I'd definitely get those tethered sticks. Super light, super cool. But yeah, and then as far as camera equipment goes, this year I was running for an interview camera. We always have an interview camera, and then a shot cam, or your main camera. I used the Panasonic this year. I'm gonna switch back probably to Canon R5, what Curtis runs, the um, DSLR. But this year I ran the Panasonic and the Canon M50, and then used the GoPro for very minimal stuff. Don't like to use the GoPro. And mostly all this stuff comes down to when let Kurt do all the editing, man, because that's where he goes. That's his thing, and he's exceptional at it for sure. And when he says he doesn't like to edit this shit, we gotta get him something better, I guess. So, if he puts it in the editing program and you don't like it, then we gotta switch it up a little bit. So, but Minnesota Buck was filmed on the Panasonic this year.
And that film isn't out yet?
No.
So what's the
you
said that was in the swamp or in a marsh?
I killed a deer in Wisconsin in the marsh, yeah. A 2-year-old, 10-pointer. My Minnesota buck was in the hills, but that was on the bottom. So, which I've been saying that I don't hunt the bottom, but I killed that thing on the bottom. But it was goofy, man. All the deer busted me. They were all busting me. And I had a hole about the size of a basketball to shoot through, and all the deer were stomping. There was a fawn. I was a stick off the ground. There was a fawn probably 5 yards from me. And there's a big doe out there too. And the big doe started blowing. The buck was, a couple yards away from my tiny little hole that I had to shoot through. I'm gonna get tore up on YouTube for that one for sure. I'm looking forward to that because the camera angles through sticks galore. So, I drew back. The fawn busted out. The buck was stomping. You can see him. He stomped both feet right in a row. Took 2 more stomps right into the little tiny hole that I had. He ducked my arrow hard, and it's probably I felt bad about it at first, only because I was filming it. But he ducked the arrow probably a good 6-8 inches. He ducked, and he was quartering away so hard. He ducked, and the arrow hit him right where the neck meets the shoulders. Hit him right in the spine, took him off all 4 feet, and just rolled him forward. I've never seen anything like it. Just flipped them. It's crazy. But I'm sure I'm gonna get wrecked on YouTube for that one.
So
Jumped
what?
out of the tree and had to shoot him again.
Yeah. So what I noticed in the Iowa film, you were shooting a Matthews Halon. Are you
Yep.
still shooting that? What's your bow? What bow you shooting right now?
I got a thing. Well, since I started making a little bit more money these days, I like to buy. I got a thing for buying bows. It's kind of the only thing that I spend my money on, really. I gave that Halon to my dad, so my dad shoots that because he was still shooting some rickety old Matthews from a long time ago. And he's got a kind of a bump shoulder, so it's like he should shoot something a little bit smoother on the draw. This I have a VXR back there, and I have a V3X. I shot a V3X this year, or yeah, V3X. Yeah. So I'm a
Nice.
Matthews guy. I like the Matthews. I'll always shoot the Matthews. I've never shot anything else, so not that I have anything against any other bows, but I do. Matthews are made in Wisconsin, and I just like them.
That's why I'm shooting a Matthews V3X this year myself. So when
The one time he hunted.
the one time I hunted.
I look forward to see what they come out with every year. I think the details in them are small, every year what they're changing these days. I mean, like the V3X has that angled roller guard and then that tight quiver on it, but I think they're all good. I think, like if you ever watch some older behind the bull videos, Josh Ogilvy, the guy with the nasty mustache, that's usually how he's remembered. That Iowa buck that he self-films, pretty good video. He's always been a Matthews guy. He switched to Hoyt this last year, and he said that he told me because this year is the first year I shot an iron will, shot a big bevel head, and I built my own arrows this year, which I'd like to get more into that kind of stuff. But he said the Hoyt, no tuning necessary. I mean, it shot the iron wills perfectly out of his bow, and he said he really liked the Hoyt. So if he says that, he shoots a lot bigger bucks than I've ever shot. So I mean, pretty good guy to listen to for sure, but still not enough to talk me out of shooting Matthews.
Yeah, I would say it's all relative to who's shooting the bow. I mean, I've I've got Hoyts, PSC, Matthews, Bowtech, and I'm just saying the ones that I don't have any Bowtechs right now. I sold the one.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, but in the Hoyts, I mean, I go up and work at the bow shop. Once in a while, I'll go up and fill in, and it's like I can get a bow to tune perfect for me, and then the next guy, the guy I'm building it for, grabs a hold of it. And, he's got an 1.5-inch right tear. It's like, well, I can only do so much. It's your form, your grip, whatever. But every bow feels different in everyone else's hands.
Yeah, I think it's the same as like shooting sniper rifles and shooting rifles in the Marine Corps. It's like everybody shoots differently. Everybody, but that's what it has intrigued me, especially with shooting those big bevel heads, or the iron wills. I just wanted to shoot them to force myself to learn a little bit more about that, about tuning bows, or building arrows. There's guys that are way, way above me, but I just, got to start somewhere. So, maybe next year I'll get a bow press and I'll start doing some of that kind of stuff too on my own. But for now, I just build my own arrows, flesh my own arrows, tune my bow myself, and it worked out pretty good for me. I mean, I guess I've never killed 2 bucks in 1 year before. So
yeah, once you get a bow press, the Matthews is one of the easiest. I mean, in a press situation, with the new Bowtechs, the prime, or not prime, but the elites, those have the tuning in the pockets or in the cam.
Oh, yeah.
So you don't have to press them. But as far as pressing bows, like the Hoyt, they actually went back to the old shims. at least you can get a little tool that the shim pops into, so you don't have to try to stick your fat fingers in there and hold it. But with the Matthews, you pop it out and you got the top hat system. That's one of the easiest to shim your cams back and forth with. So
Yeah,
that's one of the that and the switch weight technology. Like if you want to shoot, like for turkey season, I'll be putting 60-pound mods on and not having to switch limbs like I did in the past. So
see, I'm gonna have to come down by you guys and get a couple classes before I start pressing my bow together and taking everything apart for sure.
yeah,
But
come on up.
Well, that's a good thing about having John. It's like I just say, "Here's my bow," like
tune her up.
Yeah, and then I'll go over there and then I shoot it a couple times, and he's like, "Okay, we'll make a couple twists here. We'll do one of these things," and like it's really beneficial. I was having the conversation with my brother this morning, and he's like, "Yeah, I ran out of rages, so I switched over to these ram cats." I'm like, "Well, did you shoot them?" Like and he's like, "Well, they shoot just fine." I'm like, "How do you know?" Like he's like, "Well, my other one shot fine." I'm like,
that's like a field tip.
Then doesn't work that way,
I was always a big. I mean, I never had any issues with the rages. Curtis shoots the rages still. Try to talk him into shooting some of this stuff, but he doesn't really care about all that kind of stuff. Just now, he's just more worried about killing deer, and the rages never really let him. I mean, he shot his Minnesota buck right in the shoulder last year with a 2-inch rage hypodermic, and blew right through the front shoulder, almost out the back shoulder. But yeah, I mean, I've got nothing against any different kinds of broadheads. I wanted to shoot the iron wills because I liked them. Number one, I guess I just like the idea of putting almost like kind of strapping an old school arrowhead on there. When I knock it, I feel like it's tough as shit. I feel like I could, shoot anything with it. And then, also I just wanted to learn that stuff. So it kind of forced me if I'm going to shoot these broadheads. And I spent 2 or 3 weeks every day, after work, kind of figuring out that stuff. And it took me a while to get them doing what I wanted them to do. And, kind of proud of that, I guess, a little bit. Just learning that kind of stuff it's fun, I guess, for me.
Yeah, I mean that's an accomplishment of itself. I see these guys and I'm guilty of not doing it, but that know how to. I mean, John, like to sharpen your broadheads so the way they're like you don't even want to look at them, like you don't want to handle them or anything, And it's like I've messed up so many broadheads from like trying, and it gets so frustrating. And it's like, just to have like the discipline to sit down and be like, all right, I know that I have to learn this. Like I know that I have to do this to be the most ethical hunter, to do your due diligence for all that. So yeah, I mean, it's cool. Like I have John, so I'm lazy on the bow side of it. So
Well, you've kind of picked up since I sold my house back in June, and I was supposed to start my new house, and it still hasn't started yet. I'm like going to turn in my permits tomorrow, so that's why I haven't been able to hunt.
Sure, that right now is probably a tough time for that kind of stuff. But I mean, at the same time, when we're talking about like misses and stuff like that, too, that's where social media is kind of nice too, because I've, and I don't want to call these guys out or nothing, but some of the bow hunters that I look up to the most, like I don't know if you guys know who Andy May is, probably, I would assume you do. But it sounds like he missed one, and then even Levi Morgan, 15-time world champ, I'm pretty sure he shot one in Missouri, 65 yards, and looked like he put a freaking smoke shot on that thing, and then a week later he misses one, so it's like, some of these guys that are probably 100 times better at shooting bows and tuning bows and know everything there is to know about bows, people miss, it's deer hunting, so if you want to be a deer hunter, you're going to miss deer, and that's just the way it goes.
Well, I would say like the animal gets a say too. Like it isn't like, you could do everything that you want, and they
You're not
move, they duck, they
shooting a
roll.
foam target.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, that's what's kind of cool about it. And that's what, you know, people get, pretty down about missing. And I mean, I'm guilty of it too, but it's just part of the game, I guess. And then, yeah, lately I don't know, you guys do a lot of private land hunting?
No.
No?
Mm-mm. No, like I think last year I hunted on my family's property with the rifle. And I don't know, the last before that was probably the last time I went up there, which was a couple of years ago. Like
Last year I hunted up in, well, was it last year or year before last? Year before last. I hunted on Larry's property just because I was going up. My buddy Larry lived up in UP and he passed away. It was a year ago yesterday. And so I went up there a couple times to spend some time with him. And then he's got 240 acres. And so that was pretty much the only private land I've hunted in the last, 10 years.
I don't know if the UP private land really counts. I guess. I don't know. That's probably pretty tough going just the same. Deer, I mean, that's kind of pretty close to where I go gun hunting, up there in that big woods type stuff. It's hard. Those deer to try and find, like I'm talking about, like those pinches and like funnels and stuff like that up there anyways, is pretty hard to kind of narrow them down. I think they do spend a lot more time kind of browsing around. But my big thing with the private land guys this year's been everybody's just like totally bummed they're not seeing deer. And I just don't understand it, because it's like, well, if I don't see deer, then I just drive to a different public land chunk until I start finding them. It's so
Right.
and all these private land guys are so bummed. They're like, there's no deer on my land this year. Well, go somewhere else, dude. There's all sorts of stuff. I mean,
No, you want them just to stay on their private land and not see any deer. Don't go to the public. We don't need any more people in the public.
I don't know. I mean, it's just frustrating. I mean, because I got like a stepdad who's got a bunch of river bottom land, and got a bunch of friends hunting public land. And like, dude, they're just not in there this year. Well, yeah, man, it changes every single year. You gotta bounce around, dude. You gotta try something new. You'll like it if you try it. You go sit some stuff a couple times. Don't like it, move.
Well,
Drive a half hour.
that's the thing, is
Whatever.
like, even on our property in the UP, like you get 5-10 guys on 240 acres.
It gets small
Like,
real fast.
Like,
Oh yeah.
you can't, nobody's sitting in the wind. Nobody's, you're just going to your spot. Right. And so like my brother and I can do pretty well up there because we go where nobody's goes, where there's not a stand. You walk in there and you're like, well, this is where the deer should be for the wind. And lo and behold, that's where the deer are. They're not in front of your ladder stand,
Yeah.
But like finding a big piece of public, it's like you go and you see a stand or whatever, you just go further, you just go walk around, And I went to John's favorite spot and I went out there the other night, and my father-in-law had scouted it, and he said there wasn't any deer out there. And I walked in, and there's one truck in the parking lot, and I walked out there, found a couple scrapes, sat on scrapes, didn't see any deer, and I was like, yeah, okay, time to move to the next one. Like, I was like, well, it's the rut. Like, this is where they should be. If there's deer here, they're gonna be here. Like, no deer. Like, all right, well, I gave it a shot, But
I tell all these guys too. It's like, well, they're hunting the same 4 or 5 stands on their private land, depicting, or depending on what the wind's doing, they'll switch sides of the property or whatever. It's like, I think I've sat the same tree maybe maximum of 3 times in a year. I mean, I very, very rarely will ever sit the same tree. And look at the THP guys, man. I mean, they don't even hardly ever sit trees. They're just moving around on the ground.
tonight before I came over, I watched Jake kill that bone on the ground. And then I actually watched your guys' video, the Iowa video again. I was actually showing my wife because she's like, man, that was a really nice buck. I'm like, yeah, you should see this buck though. The one that you shot. I'm like, not only that, look at the quality of this film. And she was like, wow, that's pretty beautiful. Like all the scenery and stuff, like the quality of your guys' work is just,
that's Curtis for sure, man. He's, like I said, that guy's exceptional at what he does. And at this point in the, like I'm capable of editing. I mean, me and him used to edit real estate stuff, and I would edit some videos and stuff like that. But at this point, it's like I'm not even. Here's the footage. He'll ask me what I think, and we'll make some changes. But if I think, but very rarely do I ever be like, I don't like that. It's always pretty good, and I just, he's really good at that stuff. I mean, and the sound design is a big thing too. Like I think that's where a lot of the videos on YouTube lack a little bit. Curtis spends a lot of time making sure the audio is good and adding some different types of music and stuff. I think keeps people kind of, it makes you feel what's going on a little bit better, I guess, instead of just watching a deer come in for 5 minutes straight. And it's like, well, just shoot the thing already too,
or just listening to whispering for 10 minutes.
So, for people who are like, oh man, they listen this far and they're like, this is cool. Like, where can I, buy a hat, buy a shirt? Where can I watch these films? Like, where can people go to figure out like who Behind the Bow is?
Yeah, I mean, the Behind the Bow's got an Instagram. It's been doing pretty good. It's behind the bow. Got the YouTube channel, Behind the Bow, same thing. The website was a little bit different. We couldn't get the Behind the Bow, so we had to do huntbtb.com. Somebody had the domain name bought up, and we tried to get it from them, and they just wouldn't let it go. So we got huntbtb.com. That was something that frustrated Curtis a little bit, but yeah, that all the films are on the website too. Obviously, you can watch them there, but pretty much everybody's on YouTube these days, and that's where the hats and stuff are, which we should be getting some more. Bear with us a little bit, especially during the deer season. We're not very good at sending stuff out or being very timely on that. We'd like to get a little bit better, but gotta spend every chance we can in the woods.
Yeah, I hear you. But yeah, thanks for coming on. And if anybody's listening, and you work for Grizzly, Copenhagen, Kodiak, like whatever, hit these guys up. All right.
Yeah. Send some my way too.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Oh, well, thanks for coming on tonight, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate your guys' time.